Ethan was known as a man who didn't rush things. He had lived in the same small town for years, working in the fields and living quietly. Every spring he planted crops with a careful hand, tending to each patch with care. For Ethan, farming wasn't just work, it was his way of life. One day, a young neighbor named Jake stopped by Ethan's fields, looking confused. Jake was new to farming and seemed impatient as he watched Ethan kneeling over a small patch of soil, carefully placing seeds in neat rows. "Why do you go so slowly, Ethan?" Jake asked. "It takes forever at this pace. Don't you get tired?" Ethan looked up and shrugged. "Sure, it's slow, but planting a seed is like making a promise. You give it the time it needs, or it won't grow right." Jake laughed a little. "A promise? They're just seeds," he said. "I just toss mine into the ground and hope for the best. I don't see much use in spending hours making it perfect." Ethan gave a small smile and went back to planting. Everyone has their way, I suppose. Days went by, and while Ethan spent his mornings in the field, Jake rushed through his planting. He covered the ground quickly, confident he'd get a strong crop just as easily. Jake couldn't understand why Ethan spent so much time out there, checking every row, watering each patch, tending to it carefully. To Jake, it looked like needless work. A few weeks later, small sprouts began to poke through the soil in Ethan's field. He'd walk through each row, checking for signs of healthy growth, pulling any weeds, and making sure the soil was moist. When he looked over at Jake's field, he noticed the sprouts there were fewer and patchier, though he kept that thought to himself. One evening, Jake stopped by again, looking frustrated. "I don't get it, Ethan," he said, his voice low. "I put the seeds in. I watered them. But they don't look like yours. They're scattered, some are weak, and I don't see much progress." Ethan nodded, thinking for a moment before answering. "The way I see it, seeds need more than just water and soil. They need patience. They need you to pay attention to them, to help them settle and grow." Jake frowned, not quite understanding. "So you're saying if I had gone slower, I'd have better crops?" "Maybe," Ethan replied. "But it's not just about going slow. It's about planting the right way from the start. Some things take time to grow. Rushing them along won't help them become what they're meant to be." Jake went quiet, glancing over at Ethan's rows of healthy sprouts. He realized that Ethan's slow, deliberate work wasn't just a habit. It was the reason his crops grew stronger. As the months passed, Jake began to change his ways. He watched Ethan, learning how to plant carefully and tend to the small details. When the next spring arrived, Jake took his time with his seeds. He didn't rush, even when it felt frustrating. And by the time summer rolled around, his field had filled with strong, even rows of crops. Seeing this, Ethan gave Jake a knowing nod one morning. "You learned well, Jake. Seeds are like little promises, just as I said. And sometimes the best promises take time." Jake smiled, nodding. "I guess I didn't see it before. You were right. If you want something strong, you have to put in the care from the start." Ethan chuckled. "Well, that's how it is with most things. You plant with purpose today, and you'll see it grow strong tomorrow." As Jake looked out over his field, he saw it with new eyes. He wasn't just looking at crops anymore. He was seeing the value in patience, in slow growth, and in letting things unfold as they should. You see, in life, patience and care are as essential to growth as action. Rushing through something might yield fast results, but only careful, deliberate effort will bring lasting strength.